Let's speak to an alternate reality version of what we're doing over here on
The New England Take.
New England Take. I'm your host, AJ Kierstead, WKXL, 1450 AM, 101.9 FM, and 103.9 FM. Picks up the show Saturdays, 8:30 AM, nhtalkradio.com, and also thank you to granitegrok.com for also sharing out our episodes every week on Saturday. Big supporters of what those two outlets are doing. And hey, be sure to check out our YouTube channel and podcast feeds, like and subscribe, all the silly internet things. Excited to be joined today by Granite Goodness, Andy DeMeo. He reached out to me a couple weeks ago, and we were chatting online, and I'm like, let's just have a conversation on the show, because he's doing something different with granitegoodness.com, and I want to dive into it and kind of his philosophy behind this. So welcome.
Thank you, AJ. Thank you for having me. It is a great pleasure to be here with you, and I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, definitely. And you're, in recent weeks, have been blowing up. You had some fantastic guests. You had Commissioner Caswell, who right now is in the middle of a bit of a pickle here with trying to get his nomination through. So there was some inherent just attention coming from an interview like that. You recently had Mike Skelton of the BIA of New Hampshire, which is the statewide chamber of commerce, on there too. But you also do these other things where you're posting articles that are more of a positive bent. Like I always I always say that I'm optimistic, but my show here is a little snarky at times, if you couldn't tell already from the first 2 minutes of the show. But it's really important to give a different perspective. But tell me, what's the mission behind Granite Goodness and what you're aiming to accomplish over there?
Yeah, well, just let me get out of the way. I love the snark. We're here for the snark. What's the point of being optimistic if you're, boring as heck? I'm gonna try not going to swear because I know we're going on the radio. Yeah, I mean, the vision, I think that there is so much incentive out there, right, to go negative, to frame issues, whatever they are, right, whether they're political, cultural, economic, everything you can think of, through a lens of conflict, drama, and controversy, and really just negativity, right? Like, you can see this. People have studied it very intensely. There's like just this explosion in the negative sentiment in the media and all these things. And, I don't mean to poo-poo journalism. It's super important. It's an important and fascinating line of work, but just the way that the business landscape for a lot of media organizations has changed, there's just so much incentive, right, to frame things in a particular way. And my contention is that if that's all you see, right, it's both depressing, right, if all you're exposed to is just this never-ending kind of stream of negativity, it's not positive. It's also a fundamentally inaccurate way to view the world and the state of our relationship to complex problems. So the aim of Granite Goodness, right, is to take this lens, right? There's this whole movement of people you could call progress journalists. They chart and catalog and study and report on all these trends, across the world, right? Asking the big questions of like, hey, what's the state of the average person's life, compared to 100 years ago? How long do they live? What level of access to education and opportunity do they have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a lot of really positive trends, right? When you zoom out, and the nature of so many of these things is it's contrary to everything we define as newsworthy, right? Like, for something to be newsworthy, it tends to be, it's got to be new, right? News. It's got to be dramatic, and it's something unusual. It's a break from, the status quo, or so, like arguably like a plane crash makes news because we expect them to be rare in nature, right? It should be newsworthy, but if all you saw was news of plane crashes, it might give you the view that they happen all the time, but really they're quite rare statistically. So making it interesting and exciting to tell stories, right, about people working on hard problems, complex problems, which is typically the opposite of news. It's not sexy. It takes a long time. It's people working out of the limelight. Trying to make that interesting and attractive to people in kind of a media package of content, right, through a newsletter and podcast. That really is what I'm trying to do, in and around New England, because I think we're too pessimistic as a culture. We're too pessimistic as a society. And when you look at the world through this lens, my Granite Goodness goggles, I see many, many reasons. Again, not to ignore our problems. That's not the point of what I'm doing, but to have a greater awareness of progress we are making on really complex stuff. Because if you don't know that things are getting better, there's smart people working on it, it's like what's the point, right?
Yeah, and unfortunately, in recent years, the that angle has been co-opted for political reasons. Unfortunately, there's outlets. We're not going to call out anyone in particular here, but I have in previous episodes called out a couple in particular that have operated in the recent years that are very obviously doing the positive softball messaging for political incentives. That's the reason why they're doing it. They have the soft face of, oh, this politician came into town and got Dunkin' Donuts. What was their order? It's like,
Sure.
yeah, but they're not. It's like, and then then they'll get all their commentary pieces on it are very heavy hitting, aggressive, totally outside
Yeah.
of the scope and tone that they pretend to be. Like, I almost have more
Hmm.
respect for outlets that are very straightforward, saying, "Hey, screw that guy." Screw that guy
Right.
100%. Vote for my guy. Whatever,
Right.
and are straightforward with it. And it's a very cynical way of treating your audience and manipulating people to believe it doesn't. It goes beyond politics. It could be for any special interest group or things of that nature. There's this trend, especially when it comes to a lot of trade associations and stuff.
Right.
It's well known that they're manipulating the system to get what they want, but that's not positive. That's it's blatantly cynical and negative.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's been a pretty strong trend, right? Like, how often do you hear people say, oh, I don't watch the news anymore, right? I mean, the decline in trust in all legacy institutions, right? Whether they're in government or in media, is well documented, and you could argue well deserved, right? For some of the reasons you mentioned. I mean, everyone could think of an example of. I mean, I'll share a personal example of a time when that, like, what kind of radicalized me towards being like really wanting to focus on the optimistic stuff, right? I was getting on a plane, going to my dad's wedding a couple of years ago, and it was the time in the fall. It was like 2022, and there was some moment in the war in Ukraine where a missile had been launched or landed somewhere in Poland, and it wasn't clear if it was the fault of the Russians or some missile gone astray. But like, because this happened, right, and this triggered the giant existential dread leaving over the whole conflict, right? Of like, oh my gosh, is this going to ignite some huge conflict between world powers? The story I saw getting on the plane was, I swear to God, there's something in the Associated Press. It was like Russia launches missile at Poland, right? Or at least like that was the headline. And it was in like the Associated Press, which is like supposed to be like the gold standard for like, we're not going to be the biased ones. And I'm getting on the plane and I'm like, what the heck is going on? Like, is the world going to end by the time I get to Florida? Like, this is crazy. And, you know, and so I was super stressed the whole time. And obviously, a couple days go by and then you figure out it's like, okay, it was an accident. I'm not saying everything happening there isn't super horrible and that people shouldn't have strong opinions about it, right? Like, what upset me was just the feeling that something like that could happen, and that the instinct of a lot of people in the media might be, oh my God, can we be the first ones to break the story of World War III happening, right? Like, over the interest of being, accurate and not wanting to say something highly inflammatory, whether it was true or not, right? And so there have been endless, everyone, I think, at least a lot of Americans, we can all point to examples of experiences and times when we've seen something in the media and just thought, wait, that's not like, why did they say it that way? That's not what happened. Or every time that, SpaceX does a launch, right, and it doesn't go well, all the people who are there in the room are like super enthusiastic. They're like, oh my God, we got the rocket like 4,000 feet further than it did last time. And then all you see in the media is disaster, embarrassment for the company, right? And it's just like, it's so contrary to the experience who are actually there, to the experience of the people who are actually there. So I just, there's so much incentive to go negative and to characterize things in a way that just really isn't either respectful of the facts or context a lot of the time. And I would argue that is, to use your language, like it's disrespectful to what I think the noblest intentions of journalism is and should be. And that's a reason you see so many people tuning out. I mean, I think it's like 43% of Americans now say they actively avoid the news for whatever reason, probably because it's so negative. And that's like that, whatever your opinions about this outlet and that outlet being biased are, like, I think you can make a pretty strong argument that almost all of them are biased toward, conflict and negativity in some way, right? Which is not, again, like, this is the whole point. We should fight in a democracy. Like, that's the idea. We need to we have to be able to say what we think to anyone all the time, and we should disagree in public. Like, I'm totally for that. But there's a lot of progress that gets done on stuff, and you wouldn't see it if all you did was watch, the most big controversial, eye-catching stuff.
Yeah, definitely. The 24/7 news cycle definitely has done a number to it. We brought up the rage baiting is key in order to financial success nowadays. It's the whole reason why I live in the YouTube ecosystem. Like, I need to be able to have that silly thumbnail of Sydney Sweeney and things like that in order for anyone to click on a video, to have those connections that are the most crazy story imaginable. And you got to try and balance it out if you want to be viewed legitimately. I mean, it's the reason why I have people from both sides of the aisle still talking to me. Is I talk politics. 50% of the show is politically driven. It's New Hampshire,
Right.
first in the nation primary. Been covering it since 2008 as a student journalist, and then afterwards. Right. And there was this great hope in 2008 or before that cycle where with Barack Obama coming up and Twitter at the time, now X obviously, and Facebook really being a place where you can have a diversification of the media and the sort of like the small outlets that I was at Franklin Pierce University as a student at the time, student journalists to be able to do it. But even going to the next cycle in 2012, when I was here on WKXL following around Chris Ryan, and we were filming videos from the road, and they would get thousands of views, and that just wasn't possible at the time. And now the social media outlets just they hide all that stuff. Like, it's not possible if you don't have that sexy clickbait there that's going to get people to click. It's really a problem, and that's why I'm very happy to be back on WKXL, where you can kind of get past some of that. But I mean, do you have a goal or a way of doing that that you envision with Granite Goodness, where you're able to kind of, you've got this upswing happening right now, you're getting all sorts of attention because you've had great guests, but how do you make sure you're staying on the right side of this, you're able to keep that goodness part in your name and have it be accurate?
Yeah, well, it is a good question, right? Because this whole notion of trying to say, okay, well, I'm going to cover what is good in the world. What's good is a political question, fundamentally, right? And, selfishly, like, the problem that I'm trying to get at, or the thing I'm trying to solve, is like, because obviously it's my own opinion, right? Like, I'm my own editorial, chooser for what makes it into my curation of, like, I think this is positive versus something that isn't. And, I'll admit my biases, they exist, but my intention is to curate something that, the average person, at least the average American, could look at and say, okay, that's probably better that happened than it didn't, right? If you're going to talk about things that make it into my newsletter, right? Might be good news in New Hampshire newsletter, my good news in New England newsletter. And people, like, I've had people, I'll talk about, some allocation of public funds towards going to solve a problem. And you'll have people look at that and say, that's stolen money. It's tax money. Like, I don't believe in paying taxes at all, right? And it's like, that might be, one kind of extreme view of, like, okay, this person they don't believe in any kind of, taxation system at all, which is like, okay, I hear you. And then you'll have people on the other end who, you might have a story that's like, okay, there's like some big tax cut that happened. This is going to be good for these reasons. And then other people would be like, whoa, hold on, I think tax cuts are bad. Like, I don't, they benefit these people, those people.
Well, I'll give you another side. No matter how much money it is, it's never enough, and you're not doing your part if you're not astronomically increasing it. And there's always the next fight to make it go up and up and up. You see that with the school choice debate right now in the state, for example.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, for sure. I mean, that's it. It's an interesting like people, they often argue past each other, right? A lot of these issues, in my personal view, right? You have one group saying, well, we just need to fund more, fund more, fund more. And then the obvious question is like, well, what about outcomes, right? Like we should be measuring the efficacy of public funds by outcome. Are they actually producing something? And by that measure, and New Hampshire, I think, is a very interesting place to kind of ask these questions because there's a lot of metrics, depending on how you look at them, right? Like we don't look so good through the eyes of traditional kind of liberal ways of analyzing like tax revenues and whatnot, but through all these other measures, right, like quality of life in state and childhood poverty rate and quality, like there's all these different things on paper we look really really good in all these other areas. So it's like there's a perfect amount of data for people coming at from an issue on the conservative side or the liberal side to it honestly just like argue past each other. Like they both have really good data to back up where they're coming from. And so that puts me in the interesting position of like, okay, what are issues that I can talk about positive momentum on that most people would agree on, right? And that's what I try and do. Things like scientific innovations or examples of environmental conservation or sustainability projects, or more renewables, right? Like, I mean, my personal bias, right, is like I think we need to build more stuff. I very much am an abundance minded uh, type. I care a lot about conservation and environmentalism, but I think that we don't build enough on the term side of energy supply and housing supply. So those are some of my own biases that'll make it in and of like, okay, anytime that like more housing gets done pretty much anywhere, I think that's good news, right? Anytime you have some good metric of how the economy is doing, like we've got more jobs or this or that, like that's a good story to tell, or some cool example of, you know, like we have this whole biofabrication hub happening in Manchester, right? Like that's an amazing story for the state. A bunch of smart people getting together, working on the problems of the future. It's a really good economic story. So there's actually an abundance of things that I've found I can curate that like kind of steer away from all the super controversial issues of the day. Which again, those all still matter. I'm not trying to argue they don't, but there's enough out there that I think people systemically don't see. Like there's a systemic lack of awareness on like, oh, I had no idea that this measure of economic well-being or our progress on this environmental issue was like doing better than we thought it was. This stuff happens all the time and people have no idea. And then when they learn about it, it just kind of becomes normalized. So how do you make boring, slow progress interesting for people, right? Like that's what I'm trying
Well,
to do.
yeah, and I really like your good news section. So even if you don't, even if you don't like for whatever reason what Andy's doing with the interviews and things like that, I think he does a great job with what he's doing with those interviews from the perspective he's putting across. The good news things are great. Like if you're some righty weirdo like myself and you get all cringy when there's environmental stuff at the beginning, climate things like that, just go down to the next paragraph.
Right.
It's like this is
Yeah.
the issue. I mean, all the stuff you're putting in there is it's really important news that gets really sidelined because everyone's focused on the politics. You check out the headlines of any major or even many local newspapers nowadays. They're driven down to either directly politics or my local government person doing something or other. There's a lot more things that really needs highlight and coverage that just doesn't see the light of day, partly because of our social media thing, like we already talked about. But I think it's also a matter of the editorial direction that so many outlets nowadays are focused on, where they're kind of bypassing these important things, or they're doing it in such a very niche, tiny way. Like there's one statewide digital outlet here in the state where they do a lot of great reporting, but they've spent almost their entire last 6 months of having a reporter to talk about statewide dumps, and that's been like 90% of what this person seems
Right.
like they're covering, and that's the only thing that's getting promoted. When it's like there's a heck of a lot more things going on that needs to get attention and is getting bypassed.
Yeah. Well, it gets at this really interesting question fundamentally, right? And like sometimes I'd love to talk to a bunch of journalists in detail, like because again, I totally rely on all these, like, I don't really do original reporting, maybe some with the podcast. I just find stories and curate them, right, in a way that you would never really see anywhere else, at least on the regional or state level, right? Like that's kind of the secret sauce of what I'm doing. And it gives you a very different feeling than like, the doom scroll where it's an endless feed of everything going wrong. But, the question of like, well, what is the purpose of news journalism, right? Like how do we figure out that something is happening in the real world and then write about it or talk about it and then try and communicate and share that information to the people, right? And there's no right answer to that question, but I've become convinced enough that like there's such a, again, not to sound like a patronizing person who's like, you should be happier, like that's not all I'm trying to say. But you can consistently
Okay, Steven
observe.
Pinker.
Yeah. Oh, we can talk about Pinker. I love him.
I do
yeah,
too, for the
well,
record.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, if you ask people on average, like, okay, what do you think about the prospects of your own life? Like, are you happy about your own life? Do you think you're going to have opportunities in the future, right? Like, most people, 70, 80% will be like, yeah, I feel pretty good about me. And then as you expand the scope of that question, to their family, their friends, their colleagues, their community, their town, state, and nation, right? The bigger the scope gets, the more pessimistic people actually answer, right? They answer less affirmatively. They say, oh, I'm doing fine. I'm going to do okay. But it's everyone else that I'm worried about, right? And again, I'm not trying to say people don't have problems in their lives. Like they obviously do, and there's lots of things wrong with the world. But we're this really weird phenomenon sociologically where you have a lot of people individually indicating, that like they feel better than they feel about kind of the macro environment. And so there's a real disconnect between people's perception of how things are going and their individual experience, right? And you can also chart that to an awareness of like, how many people do you think live in extreme poverty in the world? How much progress do you think that we've made on reducing, pollution or expanding education or something, right? Like people consistently think that the world is worse than it is when you're talking about the state of some, complex mega problem. And, communicating this perspective of, well, certainly there's things are wrong with the world, but it might be better than you think it is a fun story to tell. Because there's always like getting people excited about like, wait, we solved the ozone layer and we solved acid rain, and how did that happen? And why do we have caloric abundance today than we didn't, 200 years ago, right? Like we should get people excited about innovation and progress and, technology. And those are even terms that have become politically coded now, which is, I think, is very unfortunate. It doesn't, like, everyone should be able to get excited about progress and technology and not think, oh, that's you're obsessed with Elon Musk if you want to get excited about technology, right? It's like,
Yeah,
can we have some nuance with these things, right? Like, I think we
it
should
used to
feel
be
out that.
a big cornerstone of the conservative movement in this country is
Yeah.
outdoorsmanship, taking care of the environment. God forbid you say environment now with many people, but it's like that's the cornerstone of it. This outdoors people that are they don't have to be agriculture. It could just be on the side. They spend the weekend cutting wood for their wood stove, or going hunting or fishing or camping and hiking. That's my. For me, I still am very much old school when it comes to that. I'm 60 years old at heart, I guess. 38-year-old
I was like,
body.
you look great.
I look great. I'm doing real good. It's something that really needs to be brought back, and it's all this political divisiveness. And I sincerely believe it comes down. We've set ourselves up psychologically to become addicted to this news feed, and it isn't just the social media feed. It goes way beyond that. When I was in a group not that long ago where we were talking about the news and stuff, and someone brought up, well, just like turn off the news for a day or two to see if you feel better. And
You
the
don't have to watch
sheer panic that came across from some of these people, I'm like, guy, like I know you're terrified of what Orange Man is doing in DC, but when you look, just for just a day or two. Just turn it off, look around you, see what's going on with your life, pay attention.
Right.
Big focus. The reason why I focus on New England specifically is what happens down the road from me. I live in Concord, underneath that gold dome, is immensely more important than 99% of the nonsense that's happening down in D.C. Same if you're in Augusta, Maine, anywhere else. That is a lot more. It comes down to what your day-to-day life is like, and what's going on with your local alderman or councilman or something like that outside of the political stuff. But what they're having make happen is going to really make you feel better about your day-to-day life, having this focus on your village as opposed to everyone's village for 300 million people.
Yes. Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. And the opportunity for engagement and the chance to actually make an impact it's so accessible here, right? Like, I mean, we have, people people make fun of our legislature, for its size and the structure of it. But, I've talked to really smart people, and they make some very good arguments that, for warts and all, whatever critiques you can make of it, it's a very representative body, at least, per capita, on a per capita basis. It's like the most representative political body, perhaps anywhere in the country, I think, possibly in the world. I don't know, but it's a very unique way of doing things, right? And New Hampshire, again, I'm biased. Like, I've lived my whole life here, and I love to talk about New England like you, but I'm here in the Granite State. I think we have so many assets, like the fact that we are not a totally captured state politically, right? Like, we're not like a one party. Yeah, we alternate between party control at the state level, but the fact that enough people, right, will vote for one party and then another, depending on the election, right? Like, the split ticket. I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing. I think it's bad that there's a trend now to sort politically where you want to live. You don't want to interact with people who disagree with you. Like, that, I think, is very contrary to the best ideals and designs and intentions of what America is supposed to be. Like, and I think we still do that really well here for all the problems people could say we have. Like, New Hampshire does direct democracy and voter participation and all these things, like, better than a lot of places, and it's a thing to celebrate. I'm proud of it.
It's the reason why I stayed down here. I mean, I'm originally from Central Maine. I went to college in '06 to 10 at Franklin Pierce, and I never left, essentially. Dragged my my then fiance, now wife, down here, and we don't want to live anywhere else. We go back to visit Maine, and it's a very different
Love
thing.
That.
Yeah, and
never leave, AJ. We need you here.
I'm not going nowhere. Trust me. All right, we got just 2 minutes left here to wrap up. But Andy, where should people go if they want to check out what you're doing, and what should they keep an eye out for in the future? We're recording this on Tuesday, August 26th, but this is going to release next week.
Sure. Yeah, you can just go to granitegoodness.com. I'm on socials. Everything is just at Granite Goodness. My name's Andy DeMeo. And, if you are looking to hear stories of underknown or underappreciated progress on all kinds of complex issues, whether it's drug addiction or entrepreneurship or, everything under the sun you could think of that, is important to people in New Hampshire, important to people around New England. That's what I talk about. I bring a perspective of optimism that is not fluffy. We talk about things that are substantive and optimistic, granite and good. That is the idea.
Yeah, I'm a big supporter of what you got going on over there. Please be sure to check out his recent interviews, Commissioner Caswell, Mike Skelton. There's a whole bunch of others. Corinne from Stay Work Play in New Hampshire, another really good one. She's a big up-and-comer here in the state that we're watching very closely. And there's a lot of voices that you only hear about in the background, and it's a chance to kind of hear face-to-face for an extended conversation what they got going on. So please be sure to check out granitegoodness.com, see what Andy's got going on over there, and it definitely highly suggested here at the New England Take. All right, newenglandtake.com. Please be sure to check out our YouTube channel as well as nhtalkradio.com. They're posting all the episodes over there. Episode last week with Professor Seth Orenberg of UNH Franklin Pierce School of Law, talking about the Genius Act and crypto, and I make sure he doesn't talk over my head as much as humanly possible for 30 minutes. Seth's great. It's fun talking to him on the show. AJ at newenglandtake.com if you want to reach out to the show. Interviews, guests, comments, talk smack. I don't care. Shoot me an email. All right, NewEnglandTake.com. Next up on WKXL is Facing the Future by the Concord Coalition. Thank you to thegranitegrok.com, and we'll talk to you soon.